The dazzling lights of the New York Fashion Gala painted the room in hues of gold and sapphire. Cameras flashed endlessly, models glided down the runway, and champagne flutes clinked like soft bells under the buzz of elite conversation. The event pulsed with opulence, power, and style, a place only the most powerful and privileged called familiar. Among the crowd, Elena moved with grace, her hand gently resting on her rounded belly, 7 months into a pregnancy that had redefined her purpose and filled her with hope. Dressed in a flowing white silk gown that shimmered like moonlight, she looked like a vision of elegance and maternal strength. She had come to surprise her husband, Damian Blackwood, the billionaire CEO whose fashion empire headlined the event. In her hand, she carried a small bouquet of fresh gardenias, his favorite. A sweet gesture, meant to remind him of the night they found out they were expecting. Elena moved carefully, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor, eyes scanning the crowd for her husband. She spotted him near the front rows, surrounded by industry giants and celebrities. The closer she got, the more her heart fluttered, nervous, excited, glowing with anticipation. This was supposed to be a moment of connection, of shared joy amidst the spotlight. But then, something shifted. Her steps slowed. Her smile faded. Her eyes locked onto a scene she wasn't meant to witness. Damian, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, stood with his arms wrapped around another woman, tall, striking, and far too familiar. Sabrina Monroe, the PR executive from Damian's firm. The hug wasn't brief or casual. It lingered, intimate, with Damian's hand resting gently on the small of Sabrina's back. Elena's breath caught. The gardenia slipped from her hand and tumbled to the floor. In a single moment, the entire glamorous world she believed in cracked in silence. 2 years earlier, on a crisp October evening in Boston, the ballroom of the Ivy League charity gala sparkled under the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. It was a gathering of intellect and influence, attended by scholars, entrepreneurs, and philanthropists. Elena stood near the silent auction table, her emerald green gown flowing around her like liquid elegance. At the time, she was a rising star in the fashion world, known for her bold designs and magnetic presence. But she wasn't there for publicity, she believed in the cause, funding scholarships for underprivileged women. It was there, amid the chatter of the elite and the gentle clink of wine glasses, that she first locked eyes with Damian Blackwood. He approached with the quiet confidence of someone used to owning every room he entered. There was no arrogance in his manner, only a powerful charisma that made people lean in. When he introduced himself, Elena raised a brow playfully, she already knew who he was. Blackwood Industries was stamped across billboards and runways from Paris to Tokyo. Yet, instead of flaunting his success, he asked her about her passion, her designs, her dreams. That night, they talked for hours in a corner booth, away from the cameras. Their connection was immediate and electric, their laughter effortless, their silences comfortable. Over the next few months, their love story bloomed like something out of a novel. Long walks in Central Park, late-night phone calls across time zones, surprise visits, handwritten letters, everything was drenched in the kind of romance that felt too good to be real. Within 6 months, Damian proposed under the stars during a private yacht trip. Elena said yes without hesitation, believing with her whole heart that she had found her forever. She slowly began stepping away from her own career, choosing instead to support Damian's growing empire. It wasn't a sacrifice, it felt like a partnership. She envisioned herself not just as his wife but as the quiet architect behind his legacy. Together, they designed a nursery in soft grays and golds before they even began trying for a child. They spoke of names, read parenting books, and dreamed of quiet mornings and messy breakfasts as a family. For a while, everything was perfect. But over time, subtle cracks began to form. Damian started coming home later, citing late meetings and emergency deals. He became more distracted, less engaged. Their nightly conversations shortened. His phone buzzed constantly, and he guarded it with new intensity. Elena, ever the optimist, blamed the pressures of work. She told herself it was temporary. She remained supportive, offering space and patience. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered that something was shifting, that the fairy tale was beginning to slip through her fingers. She silenced that voice then, burying it under hope and loyalty. After all, love wasn't always easy, and she believed theirs was strong enough to survive anything. Sabrina Monroe was the kind of woman who turned heads the moment she entered a room, not just for her looks, though she had them in abundance, but for the way she moved, the way she smiled like she knew something you didn't. With sleek black hair always perfectly styled and crimson lips that rarely curled into anything but a confident smirk, Sabrina was a walking embodiment of ambition. As a top-tier PR executive, she had clawed her way up from obscurity with ruthless focus, branding billionaires and corporations with just the right balance of glamour and control. When she was hired by Blackwood Industries to manage their international image during a major rebrand, she knew this opportunity could be more than just a career move. She had done her research on Damien Blackwood, his rise, his power, his marriage. She saw Elena's polished grace and Damien's public devotion, and to most, that would have signaled a boundary. But to Sabrina, it was a challenge. Her entry into Damien's world was subtle but intentional. On her first day, she made a lasting impression, an assertive pitch during a board meeting, a well-placed compliment about Damien's vision, and a striking red dress that stood out against the sea of navy suits. She played her role carefully, professional but warm, assertive but deferential. She made herself indispensable, staying late to finish reports, volunteering for international campaigns, and slowly positioning herself closer to Damien's inner circle. It began with harmless jokes, casual coffees in hotel lobbies during business trips, and briefings that stretched into late-night discussions in quiet lounges. Her eyes lingered longer than necessary, her laugh was just a bit too intimate, and her hand occasionally grazed his arm in passing. Damien, tired and flattered, didn't resist the attention. Whether it was the stress, the emotional distance forming between him and Elena, or the allure of Sabrina's confidence, he let the lines blur. A stolen glance in Paris turned into a drink in London, which turned into a night in Tokyo. It was never meant to be more than a distraction, a secret tucked away in time zones and private elevators. But Sabrina had no intention of remaining a secret. Each intimate encounter only deepened her hunger, not just for Damien, but for the life he represented. She began subtly undermining Elena in meetings, always smiling, always respectful on the surface, but dropping hints. Elena's style is more traditional, isn't it? Or do you ever feel like your image could be more evolved? Behind the curtain of charm and professionalism, Sabrina was calculating every move. She didn't just want Damien's attention, she wanted his empire, his name, his ring. She imagined herself in Elena's penthouse, in her clothes, at her events, raising the child Elena carried. To her, this wasn't just an affair. It was a game of power, and she intended to win it all, one stolen moment at a time. Elena first noticed the change in Damien during a quiet Sunday morning. He sat across from her at the breakfast table, his eyes glued to his phone, barely touching his coffee. She asked about his schedule for the day, trying to bridge the silence between them, but his answers were clipped, distracted. The warmth that used to color his voice when he looked at her had faded, replaced by a detached politeness that made her feel like a guest in her own home. Over the next few weeks, the small moments multiplied, late-night texts that he turned away to answer, sudden meetings that pulled him from dinner, and a growing impatience whenever she asked simple questions. He had always been busy, but now it felt like he was busy escaping her. Elena tried to brush it off, blaming hormones or the stress of his workload, but the uneasy feeling in her chest grew heavier by the day. One afternoon, while folding laundry, she picked up one of Damien's white shirts and paused. A faint smudge of lipstick, deep red, not her shade, marked the collar. It stopped her breath cold. Her hands trembled as she held it closer, trying to rationalize, to explain. Maybe it was from a photo shoot, or a hug at an event. But something in her gut twisted with a quiet certainty. That night, she sat across from Damien at dinner and watched him laugh at something on his phone before quickly locking the screen when he noticed her gaze. The air between them was colder than the untouched food on their plates. Desperate for clarity, Elena confided in her best friend, Lila, over tea the next day. Lila listened, brows furrowed, before gently asking, Are you sure, Elle? Maybe it's just the stress. You're carrying a lot right now. Elena nodded, but her voice cracked when she said, I feel like I don't know him anymore. When she confronted Damien with what she'd seen and how distant he'd become, he didn't apologize. Instead, he sighed and replied, You're overthinking. You've been so emotional lately, this pregnancy is messing with your head. His words stung more than she expected. She wanted to believe him. She needed to. But deep down, something inside her broke. She began watching more closely, taking mental notes, piecing together patterns. She didn't speak of it again. Not to him. Not to Lila. She simply waited, quietly drowning in suspicion and the slow, aching grief of a love that was starting to slip away. The crowd erupted into applause as the final model strutted down the runway in a shimmering midnight blue gown, the dramatic train sweeping behind her like a wave. Cameras flashed in rapid succession, music thundered through the venue, and champagne glasses clinked in celebration. Elena stood just at the edge of the crowd, her view momentarily blocked by a sea of swaying heads and lifted phones. She adjusted the silk scarf draped over her shoulder, the same one Damien had gifted her on their first anniversary, and inched forward through the crowd. In her hand, the small bouquet of gardenias trembled slightly. She was so close now. She could already picture Damien's surprised smile, the warmth in his eyes when he'd see her standing there, glowing and expectant, carrying the future they had once dreamed about. But as the lights shifted and the crowd shifted with it, Elena froze. There, just beyond the edge of the runway, in a velvet-roped VIP section, Damien stood with his back partially turned, his hand resting intimately on the waist of Sabrina Monroe. The same Sabrina she had seen in company photos, at brand events, always just in the periphery. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she took in the scene unfolding in slow, agonizing motion. Sabrina leaned into Damien, her lips close to his ear, whispering something that made him smile. He laughed, a private laugh Elena hadn't heard in months, and then, without hesitation, he brushed a lock of hair away from Sabrina's face and tucked it gently behind her ear. It was an act of intimacy that shattered whatever was left of Elena's hope. His hand lingered at the base of Sabrina's neck, fingers moving slowly, possessively. The noise of the event seemed to fade for Elena, muffled by the roar of disbelief and heartbreak in her chest. Her eyes stayed fixed on them, not blinking, not moving, as if hoping that if she stayed still enough, the moment would vanish. But it didn't. She saw everything. Every touch. Every whisper. Every unspoken truth unraveling in front of her like threads pulled from a beautiful tapestry. The audience around her clapped louder, cheering the finale, oblivious to the silent disaster happening just feet away. Elena's hands, once steady, trembled as the bouquet slipped from her fingers and fell to the marble floor. The gardenias scattered like fallen promises, their soft white petals crushed under passing feet. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. Her face turned pale, lips pressed into a tight line as she slowly backed away from the crowd. With each step, her heels clicked softly, echoing like a countdown in her head. She turned before Damien even noticed her presence. He was too lost in Sabrina's smile, too far gone in the illusion he'd chosen. Elena made her way to the exit, her vision blurred not by tears, but by the raw clarity of betrayal. Outside, the night air hit her like a wave. The city moved around her, cars, laughter, lights, completely unaware that her world had just collapsed in silence. She walked forward without looking back, the weight of her unborn child grounding her in each step. What was once her love story had now become her reckoning, and she would face it, not as a victim, but as a woman who knew exactly what she had seen. Sabrina leaned back in the leather seat of her town car, a smug smile playing on her lips as she stared at the photo on her phone. It was subtle, carefully crafted, not a direct image of her and Damien, but a snapshot of two champagne glasses clinking in front of a familiar skyline, with the caption, "Some things are worth the wait." It was bait, meant to stir whispers, spark speculation, and announce her silent triumph without a single word. The fashion show had gone perfectly for her. She'd walked beside Damien like an equal, basked in the glow of attention, and felt the power of being publicly, if unofficially, claimed. In her mind, she had already won. Elena, the perfect wife, was no longer a threat. And Damien, distracted by lust and ego, was too deep into the game to back out now. But while Sabrina celebrated, Elena returned home in silence. The penthouse felt colder than ever, its walls echoing with the ghosts of promises now broken. She slipped off her heels, set her purse down with delicate precision, and stared out the window into the city lights below. Her hands moved to her belly, feeling the quiet rhythm of life growing inside her. She was exhausted, not from the weight of betrayal, but from carrying it so quietly. And yet, beneath the pain, a new feeling stirred. Not rage. Not despair. Resolve. She wouldn't scream. She wouldn't confront. She would prepare. Over the next few days, Elena moved with deliberate calm. She called her lawyer first, one who had worked with her family for years, trustworthy and discreet. Then she started compiling documents, bank statements, property deeds, hidden investments, every thread of Damien's empire she had quietly helped build. She wasn't just collecting facts, she was reclaiming control. With each folder she added to her case, her strength grew. She hired a private investigator, someone Lila recommended, to follow Sabrina and uncover the truth that Damien would never confess. If there were secrets, she would find them. If there were lies, she would document them. Late one evening, after filing away the last batch of paperwork, Elena sat on the edge of the nursery chair, one hand resting on her belly. The room was still half decorated, soft plush toys stacked in the corner, pastel colors untouched by chaos. She whispered softly, her voice barely audible in the quiet room, "We deserve better. And we're going to have it." It wasn't a promise. It was a vow. What Damien didn't know, what Sabrina couldn't see, was that Elena had shifted. She was no longer the woman waiting to be chosen. She was the one choosing her future. And as Sabrina continued to post pictures and Damien continued to lie, Elena quietly built a storm that would soon tear through the illusion they both believed was safe. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. The game wasn't over. It had only just begun. 1 week later, the penthouse looked just as it always had, immaculate, sophisticated, quietly luxurious. The marble floors gleamed under the soft glow of candlelight, the scent of rosemary chicken and warm bread filled the air, and classical music drifted from hidden speakers. It was a scene crafted for serenity, but beneath the elegance simmered a storm waiting to break. Damien arrived just after 7, loosening his tie as he stepped inside. He paused briefly, surprised to see the table set for 2. It had been weeks since they'd had a proper dinner together, and for a fleeting moment, he thought maybe Elena had moved past her suspicions. Maybe things would return to the way they were. Elena appeared from the kitchen in a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, her face calm but unreadable. She greeted him with a gentle smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sit," she said softly, gesturing to his seat. Damien obeyed, glancing around, noticing the way everything felt curated, intentional. They ate in near silence, save for polite comments about the food. He tried to make small talk, but Elena didn't engage. She let him speak, let him squirm in the stillness between her measured glances. When dessert remained untouched, she finally spoke. "I saw you," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "At the fashion show. With her." Damien froze, the blood draining from his face. "Elena," he started, but she reached beneath the table and pulled out a manila envelope. She slid it toward him slowly, like an executioner presenting the final blow. Inside were crisp photographs, Damien and Sabrina in lobbies, elevators, cafes. Some were candid, some intimate. All damning. He leafed through them silently, his face collapsing into disbelief. There was nothing to say. The truth was inescapable. Elena watched him without flinching. "You lied to me. Over and over. While I carried your child. While I waited for you to come home. While I told myself you were just stressed, just tired, just distracted." Her voice cracked, just once, but she pressed on. "You thought I wouldn't see. Or maybe you thought I would and I'd stay quiet. That I'd accept less than I deserve because I'm pregnant and scared. But you were wrong. She reached for a second envelope, sleek, white, cold, and slid it across the table with a graceful finality. Divorce papers. I'm not your fool, Damien, she said, her eyes locking onto his with more strength than he'd ever seen in her. I don't need your name. I don't want your apology. I'm not staying for the baby, and I'm not leaving in shame. I'm walking away because I choose myself. I choose my child. I choose peace over betrayal. And you, she paused, the air thick with finality, you can have the mess you made. Damien opened his mouth, but no words came. The mask had fallen, the power had shifted, and the woman sitting across from him was no longer the wife he took for granted. She was something stronger. Elena stood, calmly gathering her plate. She didn't need to raise her voice or throw a glass to make her point. Her strength was in her composure. As she walked past him, she whispered one last thing, next time you touch her hair, remember what you lost. And with that, she left him sitting alone in the perfect room, surrounded by candlelight, cold food, and a truth he could no longer ignore. Sabrina Monroe sat on the edge of Damien's hotel suite bed, legs crossed, flipping through luxury bridal magazines with a glass of vintage champagne in hand. The sun poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow on her silk robe. To her, this was the beginning of the life she had envisioned, the life she believed she had earned. In her mind, Elena was out of the picture now. The wife had seen the truth, filed the papers, and surely walked away with a shattered heart. That meant Sabrina had won. She pictured herself as the new Mrs. Damien Blackwood, draped in couture, appearing beside him at galas, interviews, and business launches. She imagined walking red carpets, their matching power moves trending on every magazine cover. But the fantasy began to crumble faster than she could pour her next drink. Damien, once so attentive in secret, now seemed distracted and distant. He no longer texted good morning or stayed the night. His answers to her questions were vague, his phone calls brief, and his touch increasingly mechanical. Whenever she tried to bring up the future, marriage, public appearances, building a life, he deflected with business excuses or changed the subject altogether. The guilt had caught up to him, and the consequences were just beginning to unfold. News of the scandal hit the media like wildfire. Photos of Damien and Sabrina surfaced online, juxtaposed with images of a visibly pregnant Elena walking alone outside her penthouse. The public outrage was immediate and brutal. Sabrina's name began trending, but not in the way she'd hoped. She was branded a homewrecker, a gold digger, a manipulative snake. Comment sections overflowed with hate, influencers called her out, and even celebrities publicly distanced themselves from her. She tried to salvage the narrative with a carefully crafted Instagram post, a black and white quote about finding love in unexpected places paired with a photo of her hand on Damien's. But the backlash only grew. Fashion brands she'd once represented canceled her contracts. Her PR firm politely requested a temporary break. Invitations dried up. Doors that had once opened with a smile now slammed shut without explanation. Alone in a penthouse she no longer felt welcome in, Sabrina stared at her reflection in the vanity mirror. The glamour had faded. The thrill had turned sour. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her texts with Damien, reading the sweet lies he'd once whispered, now answered only by silence. For the first time, she saw the truth clearly, she had been a distraction. A moment of escape. Not a partner, not a future, just a phase. She hadn't replaced Elena. She had simply exposed Damien for who he really was. Her victory had no crown. No ring. No happy ending. Just a bitter aftertaste and a reputation in ruins. And as she sat in silence, with no one left to call and no spotlight to bask in, Sabrina finally realized, she wasn't chosen. She was used. After the final papers were signed and the echoes of betrayal faded, Elena made a quiet decision to start anew. She left the penthouse behind, the place filled with memories both beautiful and painful, and moved to a charming brownstone in a different city, one where no one knew her story. The fresh start wasn't just about geography, it was about reclaiming herself. Drawing on her lifelong passion for fashion and the experience she had shelved for Damien's empire, Elena launched a boutique clothing line designed specifically for mothers, elegant, comfortable, and empowering pieces that celebrated strength and grace during pregnancy and beyond. The boutique quickly became a haven for women who, like Elena, wanted to embrace their changing bodies without sacrificing style. Her journey of healing wasn't solitary. Lila, her best friend and unwavering pillar, was by her side through every step, late-night talks, gentle reminders of Elena's worth, and countless cups of tea shared over dreams for the future. Elena also sought professional help, attending therapy sessions that peeled back layers of pain and planted seeds of resilience. Each appointment helped her find peace with the past and hope for what lay ahead. The nursery she had once prepared in that cold penthouse was now filled with laughter and soft sunlight in her new home. When the day came to bring her baby boy into the world, Elena felt a surge of emotions that no words could capture. The hospital room was calm, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had defined her recent months. Holding her son for the first time, she whispered promises of love, protection, and a life filled with happiness that she would fiercely build. The experience transformed her, not as Damien's wife, but as a mother, a woman reborn from the ashes of heartbreak. News of Elena's strength and new beginnings spread quietly at first, then with more momentum. Local media picked up her story, not the scandal or the betrayal, but the woman who chose courage and reinvention. She was featured in a popular lifestyle magazine, her boutique showcased alongside inspiring stories of resilience. The community rallied around her, offering support and admiration for a woman who had turned pain into purpose. Far away, Damien watched from a distance. No longer the powerful billionaire commanding every room, he was now a man grappling with loss and regret. He scrolled through articles celebrating Elena's success, saw photographs of her radiant smile beside her child, and felt the weight of what he had truly lost. It wasn't just a wife or a marriage, it was a legacy of love, trust, and family that he had carelessly shattered. Elena's new life was a testament to strength beyond wealth, a reminder that true power comes from rising, not ruling. Damien's fall from grace was swift and unforgiving. The scandal that had once seemed like a private affair exploded into the public eye, shaking the foundation of Blackwood Industries. Investors, once eager to back his ventures, grew wary, questioning the stability of a leader whose personal life had become a tabloid spectacle. Stock prices dipped as rumors circulated, and shareholders demanded accountability. Behind closed doors, the board convened in urgent meetings, their confidence in Damien eroding with each new headline. Ultimately, the decision was unanimous: Damien was to be removed from his position as CEO. Paparazzi no longer respected the privacy of his luxurious estate. Flashbulbs and drones swarmed the gates day and night, capturing every move, every entrance and exit. The man who once commanded respect now found himself hiding behind drawn curtains and security guards. Friends distanced themselves, partnerships dissolved, and the empire he had built with ambition and cunning began to crumble like sand slipping through his fingers. One evening, alone in his expansive yet empty mansion, Damien sat in the dim light of his study, scrolling through old photos on his phone. Pictures of Elena laughing, radiant in a garden, holding his hand at charity events, and the ultrasound images they had once celebrated together. Each image stabbed deeper than any public condemnation. For the first time, the reality of what he'd lost settled heavily on his shoulders. He realized, painfully, that loyalty and trust, things he had taken for granted, were priceless. Money could build empires, but it could not buy back love or forgiveness. Desperation led him to reach out to Elena, sending messages filled with apologies and promises. But each attempt was met with silence or, worse, the cold block of her phone. She had moved on, rebuilt her life on foundations stronger than a shattered empire. Damien's regret was a lonely companion in the vast halls of his hollow victory, a stark reminder that some losses cannot be undone, no matter how much power or wealth one commands. A single hug can change everything. It can build a home, or shatter one beyond repair. In the story of Elena and Damien, that embrace wasn't just a moment of weakness or desire, it was a betrayal that cracked the foundation of trust, love, and commitment. Emotional betrayal cuts deeper than any wound, leaving scars invisible to the eye but heavy on the heart. It reminds us that love isn't about possession or power, it's about respect, honesty, and the courage to listen to our instincts. Elena's journey is a testament to the strength that lies within those who choose to stand up, walk away, and rebuild when faced with heartbreak. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it often is. And when it's time to let go, know that walking away isn't defeat, it's survival and, ultimately, freedom. Women like Elena show us that true power is not in holding on to a broken promise but in reclaiming your story and writing a new chapter. Their strength inspires those who watch, reminding us all that no matter the pain, hope and resilience light the way forward. In the quiet stillness of a sunlit park, Elena walks with her child nestled in her arms. Her face is radiant, calm, and unbothered by the shadows of the past. Around her, life moves gently, the laughter of children, the rustling of leaves, the soft hum of a world that never stops turning. Suddenly, a ball slips from the child's grasp and rolls to the ground. A stranger, a man with kind eyes and a warm smile, bends to pick it up and hands it back to her. The brief connection, simple and sincere, hints at new beginnings, possibilities waiting quietly just beyond the horizon. The screen fades to black, and words appear. Sometimes, the one who walks away, walks towards something better. It's a message of hope, resilience, and the unshakable truth that leaving behind what no longer serves us can open the door to a brighter, more fulfilling future. Elena's story reminds us that while power can be fleeting, love and self-respect endure, guiding us home.